being that we have been out of Hollywood for so long lately, I thought, you know, why not go to one of my favorite places? It's increasingly becoming more apparent living in this town and seeing what they're doing to Sunset Boulevard that a lot of the Hollywood history, just with the people in charge, the politicians, they just don't care about it, and a lot of it's going by the wayside. Now this happens to be probably the most important building in Hollywood, if you ask me, and I love that it's still here, and I know I'm always getting new subscribers, and this is a museum. It's run by volunteers, and so the exhibits are ever changing, but this is maybe one of the coolest places in Hollywood, like I said, because this is where Cecil B. DeMille filmed the very first feature-length film, The Squaw Man, right here in Hollywood. Now it also holds a real special place in my heart because the first time that I met Leonard, Jasmine, and Amaya, one of our hangouts was here. We all came here and vlogged this together. So this barn used to be over on Vine Street, where now there's a bank, and before that it was NBC Radio, and it's been a handful of other things, but up until 1926, right there on basically Sunset and Vine, this barn was there, and this was the foundation of Paramount Pictures. I mean, it was one of the buildings on the Paramount lot until Paramount ended up moving over to where it is now. Now, when Paramount moved, they actually took the barn with them. And the barn for a while was on the Paramount lot, and I believe it was used as like a physical fitness center, and they also used it for the prop guys to build sets and build props in. And then eventually they got the great idea of like, let's preserve this, let's keep this the museum, or keep it a historical building that can be a museum for the silent film era of Hollywood, the early Hollywoodland movement era of this town. So they moved it over to here, actually picked it up, put it on a truck, and moved it over here, and it's in really fantastic condition. Inside they have Mr. Cecil B. DeMille's office still intact with many of his personal belongings, and then, like I said, an ever-changing exhibit of silent movie, early Hollywood, and just all the cool things that made this town, you know, the reason that everybody wanted to be here. And they give you a little historical information out front showing that the barn was built in 1901 when this was all agriculture. This was like orange groves and lemon groves, and then they turned it into a production house because you got to remember, in those days they couldn't film at night, so they had to have somewhere where they could put lights inside and they could still film at night. You couldn't film outdoors at night, so here it is on the old Paramount lot. Well, the Paramount lot now, when it was there though in 1938, and then there it is in 1928. I mean, this was a big deal. This was a pivotal move because you got to realize before this they were filming things in Boston and they were filming in Chicago, and there were really production houses everywhere, but they all had to shut down because of the weather during the winter time. And so they all started to get the idea of, hey, let's go west when the weather is always good. And Hollywood became, you know, one of those places that they set up shop, and everything built up around it eventually. And I love that it's in such great condition. I mean, this has seen some days out here in the hot California sun, and yet it's still not warped or nothing looks like it's falling apart. They've done a great job, the Historical Society that keeps this going. And I do know our friends that run the Jack Oakey and Victoria Horn Oakey Foundation help support this as well, and there's a wing here that we all came and helped dedicate. And here it is. They're mentioning it here when it was on the lot in 28 being part of the gym. And then there's Mr. DeMille out in front when it was the gym. Now take a look at that, okay? Take a look at that photo. Cecil B. DeMille right there in front. There it is. That same shot. Been right there at that same door. It's right across the street from the Hollywood Bowl, which is directly over there, which makes it also pretty cool. So let's go inside and see what's new. They've always been really great to us coming here. And I'm sure some of the stuff we'll see that we've seen before, but like I said, not everybody has always watched this channel. and I'm sure some things will have changed. Well, we're starting into Mill's office. I always insist on it, even though we've seen it a bunch of times. It's just too cool. I mean, this guy was everything back then. He was the mark of quality, and he could pretty much get away with anything. I think one of the craziest stories that I ever heard that I just thought was amazing was that he would use live lions, like real lions, for scenes with Gloria Swanson, and she literally laid at the foot of the lion and would do the scenes when the lion could very well have attacked her. Look, they actually got like the things from his office, the old typewriters and his hat. There are his shoes and his name on the crates as well. There he is. Guy was pure business. Let's take a look at what's on his register for the day. That's from 1913. Look at that. That's crazy. Wow. Here's this bullhorn. And here's the Paramount lot when it was all over there on Sunset before it moved. You can see all the sets and the working sound stages and everything over here. It's kind of interesting. And this is 1956. Wow, you guys can't tell from the camera, but this is Mary Astor's apron, and it is tiny. I mean, tiny. She couldn't even been 5 foot tall. Signed photo of Judy Garland. Here you can see Judy Garland in a screen test or a wardrobe test. And then there's another wardrobe photo test. And here's that door, the other side of the door we were looking at earlier. The address. This is all Judy Garland. See what's going on here. It looks like it might be someone's collection or all signed. There's little annotations on them. These were Judy Garland's handwritten annotated pages of a book authored by Robert Osborne. So it says, "I'm in good company." And then over here it says fat, oily, enslaved to masses. Then at the very bottom, you can see it looks like she wrote, "Maybe a few bricks were laid." And this says this is a personally owned Judy Garland record. This recording Judy used at home to rehearse the song "I Don't Care." She would later be filmed performing along this album's song in her 1949 film "In the Good Old Summertime." The record was later given to makeup artist Dottie Ponadell. Dottie's niece Meredith says this is about the history of the record. That particular song scene was one of my aunt's favorites, which could be why Judy gave her the disc. I first discovered it when I was really young, and it was instrumental in my learning about how movies are made. Both Dot and Dad described the dubbing looping process to me when I didn't understand what all those beep beep noises were. I hope you enjoy it. And that's a photo of Judy Garland by Roddy McDowell. Of course, he had a massive photography hobby that he collected photographs of all of his friends and celebrities. And this book is signed out to Betty Rose. Betty married Judy's first husband, David Rose. So it says, "Dear Betty, may each page in this book represent the years of happiness in store for you and David. Love, Frances." Oh, wow, she signed it Frances. Interesting. Frances Gum. And then this is A Star Is Born sheet music signed and owned by Valerie Harper. Now, deceased Valerie Harper, and there you can see her signature. I'm really glad we came in today. This is all new stuff. Now let's go see the new Egyptian stuff. That's a chariot wheel from the Ten Commandments. Not the silent version, that 1956 Heston one. And this one, this chest, says is the chest in the throne room of Pharaoh Sethi, Sir Cedric Hardwicke's scene. Ten Commandments, 1956 also. You can see all the detail, how some of it's broken, flaking apart now. That movie is beyond iconic. That's just incredible to see. You almost wonder if that broke off or if people took it as souvenirs at some point. So one of the major things that you have to know about Cecil B. DeMille is that he was extremely religious, and his family was, and so he did a lot of biblical movies, which are a challenge in and of themselves. But he had done the Ten Commandments originally and filmed it out here in Guadalupe, about 3 hours north of here, out in like a hot desert. And then when production was done, it just seemed like too much of a hassle to remove it, so they just left it out there and let the sand cover it up, to be found years later. But he eventually obviously did Ten Commandments again in 1956, and what they're saying is that he when he redid the movie, he would reuse a lot of the same props from like 30 years before. So it says one of Cecil B. DeMille's greatest triumphs was in his 1923 production of the Ten Commandments, an original story. It was composed of a modern story about an unprincipled architect building an unsafe building, which paralleled the story of Moses giving the Ten Commandments to the Israelites after having led them out of Egypt. A landmark film for its cost of production and the size of its set, the film was one of the first to cost over $1 million to make, but made 4 times that amount at the box office in ticket sales. DeMille specialized in epics, many of which had religious themes. King of Kings, which they don't say here, but King of Kings, he actually filmed the olive orchard scene in his backyard, which is the house that Angelina Jolie now owns. He also filmed The Sign of the Cross and The Crusades. And in 1956, he decided that he would remake the Ten Commandments, only this time in Egypt, not in Guadalupe, California, as he had done the first version. Dropping the modern story, the film was the story of the life of Moses, played by Charlton Heston, and his nemesis. The second film budgeted $13 million and made $155 million. Many of the props made for the 1923 film were reused in the 56 version. Bows, spears, swords, chariots, and other props were pressed into double duty 33 years later. Huh. And it says these were actually used in both versions, both the helmet, the shield, and the spears on both sides. So these fur coats belong to actress Alice White, and Alice White was kind of interesting because she was First National Pictures answer to Clara Bow, and she was a Hollywood high school graduate. She became a secretary for Joseph von Sternberg, and eventually became an actress and would invest quite a bit of her fortunes into these fur coats, which she loved. And they said it's significant because she was one of the very first people to donate anything to this museum in 1986 when it opened, and these were donated by her estate. So there's Alice White. Mary Pickford's makeup case. How cool is that? Take a look. America's sweetheart. We'll get in there and look around here. Like powder puff over here. Now it says America's Sweetheart was the title given to Mary Pickford, one of the earliest actresses to be identified in film by her own name. She had previously been known as either the Biograph Girl or Little Mary. She went on to be one of the most successful women in film history, a founder, along with Douglas Fairbanks, D.W. Griffith, Charlie Chaplin, and William S. Hart, of the United Artists Film Company. So this camera was kind of a big deal at the time because it said it was a 70mm grandeur camera they developed in 1927 to use for Fox's The Big Trail starring John Wayne. And this amazing old chair, it says, was from Cecil B. DeMille's 1915 movie The Cheat, starring Fannie Ward and Jack Dean. And there below it is the chair itself, or part of it. You can see the arm of it there. I just love that they have these in here. It's not that they're from any specific collection or anyone. It's just they're so important to the movie business, you gotta have them hanging around smiling. Well, kinda smiling. Right, Stanley? Now these casts are actually from Cleopatra, the Richard Burton, Elizabeth Taylor historic movie, for historically being over budget. These were used in the movie. Now it was a pretty famous movie because, for one thing, this is really when Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton started having their affair and making headlines about it. But Elizabeth Taylor, they were filming part of it in London and she was getting sick, so then they moved it to Rome and then eventually Egypt, and that's when she was having the chastened chili flown in. Kind of cool to see these. They said that they tried, or they auditioned Marilyn Monroe and Audrey Hepburn and various other people for the role, eventually giving it to Elizabeth Taylor. Now take a look at this movie. This is The Squaw Man. This was the very first feature-length film that Cecil B. DeMille directed here, and this was filmed inside this barn. Okay, now I told this story before. If you go find a vlog that I did about Betty Davis's early house and the siege at Fort Anthony, it was right around the same time I did the Hollywood commune that Linda Ronstadt and the Eagles lived at, because it's right next door to it. They tell that in 1960 a film museum was planned for the land where the Hollywood Heritage Museum is now. So they were originally going to do another film museum here. Said a number of the residents were removed to accomplish this goal. A single resident and former Marine Stephen Anthony resisted the attempts to remove him and demolish his residence. Mr. Anthony claimed his home had been constructed by set builders for the movies and contained elements used in the sets for silent film The Prisoner of Zenda in 1922, and had been the first Hollywood residence of actress Betty Davis, which I had read that as well, and I think I put that in my vlog, that he was living in Betty Davis's first Hollywood residence. And it said, following his armed attempt to avoid leaving the house, Mr. Anthony and his family were removed and the house was destroyed. Scavengers located the only remaining complete part of the home, this trunk, and donated it to the Hollywood Heritage in 1986. Mr. Anthony was a volunteer in the relocation and restoration of the barn to become the Hollywood Heritage Museum. Wow. They just kicked him out. Now over here you see a Cecil B. DeMille King of Kings, but then you also see an old peep show. And I don't believe this was here last time we were here. This is an old Edison kinetophone, what they called the first home movie system in your home. And those are our movies right there. Now this set stood down at Hillhurst and what is that, Vermont, that area, forever after they filmed it. This was an actual real set, and when they created the Hollywood and Highland shopping complex, they based the design off of this. So when you go to Hollywood and Highland and you walk around to go do your mall shopping, it literally looks exactly like this. That is all Valentino collection. The woman in black at his grave. The story behind that was that she was sick and dying, and that Valentino came and said a prayer for her and she lived, and I believe that was the story. And so she went to his grave many, many decades after. Many women claim to be the woman in black. There's still, every year, women that show up claiming to be the woman in black. Here were some of his photo play and different magazines he would have been on the covers of at the time, as well as there's music from his movies, but he did sing. He was a pretty good singer. If you look online, you can find his recordings. Actually, this is one. There's a new star in heaven tonight. Valentino cigars. And then they have a little model of one of his cars. So right here, this little note, it says that it's signed by Deidre Fling. That was the real woman in black. There he is on that box. Those two glasses. And to Hollywood Forever's credit, they have been doing a memorial for Valentino ever since he passed away. So we're talking almost 100 years. Oh, and this is a photo album of Jesse Lasky, one of the founders of Paramount. Imagine what all's in there. There's a bust of Jesse Lasky. Boy, they owe him a lot. They really do. A lot of those early film companies didn't make it. And just look at that door. Isn't that kind of cool? I mean, think of how much equipment, when they were filming 1913 Squaw Man, think of how much equipment they would have been rushing in and out. Just, you know, not knowing they were making history. Just trying to make a buck, probably. Yep, it's a real barn. It's not just called the Lasky DeMille barn. It is truly a barn. And it's cool. You should sign up for their mailing list because they do movies and various specialty events here. We've been invited a handful of times. Then here, this is awesome. For people that may not know much about silent movies, you can learn about some of the greatest stars here. Rod LaRock, Ramon Navarro. We've been to his grave and talked about his unfortunate killing. Valentino. Norma Shearer, which a lot of people don't really think of her being a silent movie star, but she made the transition very, very well. And her brother, Douglas Shearer, was the head of sound for MGM. Some say that he was the one that was told to sabotage John Gilbert's voice to kill his career. There's the great Wallace Reed. We talked about him. Poor guy was a star making action films and got hurt, and they started pumping him full of drugs to keep him able to work, and finally he ended up dying in a sanitarium. But to, you know, I guess in some ways something good came of it. His wife was responsible for making sure that that didn't happen in the future and that people were taken care of. There we have Gloria Swanson and Mary Pickford, of course. Patrice Joy, she was John Gilbert's wife. Of course, Stan and Ollie, we've been to both of their graves and both of their homes. And there's Alla Nazimova, the woman who bought the property and started the Garden of Allah, if you remember when I vlogged that. Became a big party house and a disaster financially. So check this out, this is pretty cool. All of these seats come from famous theaters around the country that were instrumental in getting movies off the ground. So this first one, it says the State Theater in Santa Barbara. And then this was the Village Theater, this yellow one, in Palm Springs, which we've been over there to that theater. This one, it looks like this one was from the Golden Gate Theater in LA. Never heard of that one. And then this one was from the Los Angeles Theater, which we've been by, and I believe the Los Angeles Theater is featured in Fight Club. 1931, it's down on Broadway. And then check this out. This one is from the Wiltern, which we've also vlogged. Wow. And then it says this is from the Astor. In this fantastic last case that we're gonna look through, those are all Harold Lloyd ornaments. Harold Lloyd had a major fascination with Christmas and used to keep a Christmas tree up all year round. In fact, they have a picture of him right there with it. Or I should say with one. I'm sure he probably swapped them out over the years, but there are some of his famous ornaments. And then some more down here. They're huge too, so obviously the tree was massive. You know, right up there with Dearly Departed and the Grammy Museum, this is one of my favorite museums in all of Hollywood. So if you're looking for a cool place to come when you come visit, don't sleep on this one. It's called the Hollywood Heritage Museum. Sometimes it's called the Hollywood Studio Museum. It's only $7, but it's only open on Saturday and Sundays from noon to 4. So plan accordingly, but it is so cool. Totally worth it. If nothing else, it's just important to be standing inside this barn. Without this barn, who knows where the film industry would have moved to or started or when or what would have happened. But I mean, this was the first feature-length movie ever made, and it was made right here in this building. And also, they always have volunteers here that can give you a tour and answer your questions. They know a lot. It's great. Really a great place. And I mean, seriously, where else can you get a selfie with something from the 10 Commandments? Look, as I was walking around, I just found in a corner another scepter from the 10 Commandments. Oh yeah, and I totally forgot to show you guys the model of what original Paramount would have looked like when they filmed the movie and everything. It would have just been one block. They have. All right, we are done here. Let's take off from the Hollywood Heritage Museum. Don't forget, only open on the weekends. You and I were out hanging out this morning, weren't we? Yeah, people get mad if I don't show you. Even if you're taking a break, they get mad if they don't get to see your face. Tell them they're gonna have to keep tuning in day after day until you wear the shark outfit. Well, good evening, my friends. We're gonna call it a day. I want to thank Daryl Brown and Gilbert Clark for becoming my newest Patreons. Thank you all for watching. I have a pretty fun one planned tomorrow. Well, it'll definitely be an interesting one, so have a great night and come back and see me then. Goodbye.